Last night, I walked through a town where every house still had its lights on, except no one has lived there for the last 50 years. What if this was you? Before I go into the full story, subscribe now and turn on post notifications so you can hear my stories again and also get notified when I send a gift your way. Also, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now turn on the fan to have that soothing background hum while you listen. Story 1. They told me not to stop in that town. Keep driving, don't even slow down, they said. But curiosity got the better of me. I didn't believe the stories until I saw lights glowing in every house, and not a single person outside. I should have kept going. I should never have stepped out of my car. It was late evening, the kind of night where the road stretches endlessly and the hum of the tires becomes a lullaby. I was on a long drive, passing through back roads that barely showed up on GPS. I remember fiddling with the radio trying to find a station, but all I got was static. The dashboard clock blinked 11:47 p.m. I spotted the town sign first. Faded letters that read, "Welcome to Hollis." It looked quiet, almost peaceful. Street lamps glowed faintly, rows of houses lined up neatly, and I thought maybe I could grab gas or at least stretch my legs. From a distance, it looked alive, like a small town holding onto its charm. But the closer I got, the more I noticed something strange. Every house had its lights on, every single one. Warm yellow glows poured from the windows, as if families were inside, eating late dinners, watching TV, or getting ready for bed. But the streets? Completely empty. Not a single car parked on the sides. Not a single curtain moved. I slowed down, expecting someone to step out, maybe a shop owner locking up for the night. Nothing. Just the faint buzz of the street lamps. I told myself, small towns can be like this. Maybe everyone's just in for the night. But then I noticed the gas station. Brightly lit, pump handles hanging neatly, the convenience store door wide open, and still no one, not even a clerk at the counter. I parked my car, engine ticking softly in the cool night air, and stepped out. That's when I noticed something else. The lights weren't just on. They flickered in unison, like they were running on the same heartbeat. I walked toward the gas station, calling out, "Hello!" My voice sounded too loud, like it didn't belong there. No answer. Inside, shelves were stocked, the refrigerator hummed, but there wasn't a soul in sight. A candy bar wrapper lay crumpled on the floor, fresh, like someone had just dropped it. Then came the sound, a low murmur, like overlapping whispers, drifting through the aisles. I froze, trying to pinpoint where it came from. It wasn't one voice. It was dozens, blending together, rising and falling like a crowd hidden behind the walls. I bolted back outside. The houses stared at me, their windows glowing. I swear I saw movement in one, a figure passing by, but when I squinted, the room was empty. I told myself to calm down, get back in the car, just leave. But when I reached for the handle, I noticed something chilling. My car headlights weren't on anymore. I hadn't switched them off. The keys were still in the ignition. That's when the street lamps started buzzing louder. One by one, they dimmed, leaving me under patches of darkness. The whispers followed me, growing clearer now. They weren't random, they were chanting something, a name, over and over. I ran down the street, not even sure why. Maybe I thought I'd find someone, anyone, who could explain this. But the more I ran, the more the town seemed to stretch. Blocks repeated themselves, same houses, same porches, same glowing windows. Then I saw it. In the window of a two-story house, a figure stood, perfectly still, watching me. I couldn't make out the face, just the outline. As soon as I locked eyes, the lights in every house went out. The entire town dropped into darkness. I was swallowed by silence. The chanting stopped. Even the wind seemed to die. For a moment, I thought maybe it was over. That's when the windows lit up again. Every single one, all at once. And now, every window had someone standing in it. Dozens of figures, watching me, not moving, not blinking. I staggered back toward my car, legs shaking, heart hammering so loud I thought it might burst. When I finally reached it, I yanked the door open and collapsed into the driver's seat. The keys were gone. I tore the car apart. Glove box, floor, even under the seats, but they weren't there. Then I noticed the rearview mirror. Hanging from it was my keychain, slowly spinning. Someone had placed it there. The whispers started again, louder this time, like they were inside the car with me. I didn't wait. I slammed the gear into neutral, rolled the car downhill, and prayed the engine would catch when I popped the clutch. By some miracle, it did. I floored it, never looking back. But here's the part one can't explain. Hours later, when I finally stopped at a diner far from Hollis, the waitress poured me coffee and asked if I'd been through that area before. I said no. She leaned in and whispered, "Funny. Folks around here say once you see the haunted town, it never really lets you leave." I didn't answer her. Couldn't. Because when I glanced out the diner window, I swore I saw a row of houses glowing faintly in the distance. Tell me, would you have stepped out of the car? Do you think it was really abandoned, or something waiting for me to join them? Comment below what you believe, and let me know if you've ever passed through a town that felt wrong. Story 2. If you ever find a town that doesn't appear on any map, don't stop. I did, and I wish I hadn't. The streets looked normal, the people seemed friendly, but by the time I realized something was wrong, it was too late, because the whole town was waiting for me, like they'd been expecting me all along. I was driving cross-country for work, exhausted and half asleep at the wheel. My phone battery had died hours ago, and I was relying on faded highway signs to guide me. When I spotted the glowing lights of a town in the distance, relief washed over me. There it was, rows of houses, a main street with neon signs, even a diner that looked straight out of the 1950s. Felt welcoming, like a postcard come to life. After hours on the empty highway, seeing a town bustling with light felt like salvation. I parked outside the diner, stretched, and took in the scene. Music drifted from the jukebox inside, muffled conversations, clinking silverware. Felt normal. Too normal. The first thing that bothered me was the clock. A big one hung inside the diner, right above the counter. It read 11:15. When the waitress poured me coffee, I glanced back up. Still 11:15. 10 minutes later, nothing had changed. I asked her about it. She smiled too widely, showing too many teeth, and said, "Oh, it's always that time here." I laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. But when I looked around, I noticed every wristwatch in the diner showed the same thing. 11:15. Even the neon clock in the corner. When I asked how late they stayed open, the man at the next booth leaned in and said, "We never close. We're always here, waiting." I should have left right then, but something in me wanted to understand. I walked outside, needing air. The street was lined with people, too many for a town that small. Men, women, even children, all standing on porches or sidewalks, staring at me. They weren't talking, just staring. I tried waving, asking if there was a motel I could crash in. None of them moved, not even a twitch. Then, in unison, every streetlight flickered once. And just like that, the people turned and walked away, disappearing into their homes. The street was empty again. Confused, I tried to find my car, except it wasn't where I parked it. I circled the block once, twice, 3 times, but no car. When I asked a passing man about it, he said, "Cars don't leave here. Neither do people." That was when I noticed something strange about him. His eyes were glassy, like marbles. No whites, no pupils. Just smooth surfaces that reflected the streetlight. I panicked and ran into an alley. The sound of footsteps followed me. Not one set, but dozens. When I turned, shadows stretched along the walls, but no bodies cast them. They moved on their own, curling and twisting toward me. I stumbled backward, knocking over trash bins, until I burst onto another street. And there it was again, the diner. Same neon sign, same clock in the window, frozen at 11:15. No matter which way I ran, I always ended up back at the diner. I tried alley after alley, street after street, but the town looped around itself like a maze. Finally, I slammed through the diner doors, breathless. Everyone inside turned to look at me, This time, no one pretended. Their glassy eyes gleamed under the lights. They all smiled the same smile, wide and hungry. The waitress walked toward me, holding a steaming cup of coffee. "It's time," she said softly. "You finally made it." I grabbed the cup without thinking, desperate to do anything but stand frozen under their stares. The moment the coffee touched my lips, the diner went dark. When the lights came back, I wasn't sitting in the diner anymore. I was in a booth, surrounded by strangers who looked terrified, just like me. Their eyes darted around as if they were waiting for something. The clock ticked, 11:15, and then I realized I wasn't a visitor anymore. I was one of them, stuck, trapped, another soul in a town that didn't exist on any map. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember the drive after. All I know is, when I finally opened my eyes again, I was back on the highway with a cold cup of coffee sitting in the cup holder. The cup had the diner's name printed on it, Hollis Junction. But when I searched for it later, there was no such town. Tell me, if you were me, would you have stayed to figure it out? Or driven off the second you saw those clocks? And do you think once you drink from their cup, you ever really leave? Story 3. When I returned to my old school years after it had been shut down, I thought I was just walking into an abandoned building. But the halls weren't empty. Someone or something was still there. And the worst part? They remembered me. Started as a dare. A few friends from my hometown thought it would be funny to sneak into the school where we all grew up. The place had been closed for almost 15 years after a fire damaged part of the science wing. We went late at night, flashlights in hand, laughing too loudly to cover our nerves. The gates were broken, weeds tangled up through the fences, and the old building looked worse than I remembered. Windows shattered, paint peeling, doors hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Still, nostalgia pulled me in. I wanted to walk the hallways where I once sat through endless classes, where I scribbled my name on desks and whispered secrets with friends. I didn't know I'd find something waiting that had never left. Inside, dust covered everything. The smell of mildew hit us immediately, mixed with something sharper, like burnt wood. My flashlight beam cut across lockers dented with age, old class photos curling in frames, slogans painted on the walls. Knowledge is freedom. We made our way to the auditorium first. Chairs were overturned, the stage curtains shredded. One of my friends climbed up and pretended to give a speech, making us laugh, but I noticed something odd. The microphone stand had been polished. It gleamed in the beam of my light. Everything else was decaying, but that single object looked untouched. Then the sound came. A bell rang, clear, loud, and sharp. It echoed down the hallways like it was calling us to class. But the school hadn't had power in years. We froze, staring at each other, trying to laugh it off. "Probably just metal settling," someone muttered. But then came the footsteps, dozens of them, the heavy, uneven stomp of shoes hitting tile floors. They came from every direction at once, filling the corridors, moving toward us. We turned off our flashlights, thinking maybe we could hide. That was a mistake. In the dark, the air felt thick, like we weren't alone. Whispers started up, snatches of lessons, children's voices repeating multiplication tables. A teacher's tone saying, "Eyes on your paper." I flicked my flashlight back on and nearly dropped it. At the end of the hallway, a row of students stood shoulder to shoulder. Their uniforms were charred, their faces pale. None of them had eyes, just hollow sockets that seemed to look straight through me. We backed away slowly, but the sound of the bell rang again, louder this time. The children tilted their heads in unison, then began walking toward us. We bolted down another corridor, hearts pounding, feet slamming against the tile. I thought we'd lost them until we reached the science wing, the place where the fire had started years ago. The walls were scorched black, lockers melted into the floor. As we passed a doorway, the temperature dropped instantly. I glanced inside and saw a classroom, perfectly preserved, desks neatly lined, chalkboard covered in writing. Except, the writing was my name, over and over again, scrawled in frantic white chalk. Then, at the teacher's desk, a figure rose. Her hair was singed, Her skin blistered. It was Mrs. Harrington, our old science teacher. I remembered she hadn't survived the fire. She pointed straight at me and screamed my name, the sound tearing through the walls. The glass in the windows shattered outward. My friends screamed, scattering in different directions, but I couldn't move. Her voice pinned me in place. I don't remember running. I don't remember how I made it back outside. All I know is that when I stumbled into the parking lot, gasping for air, I was alone. My friends weren't there. Their cars were gone. Panicked, I drove home, convinced they'd left me behind. But the next morning, when I called them, every one of their phones went straight to voicemail. Later that week, the police claimed they'd never entered the school with me. No missing persons report, no trace of them at all. It was as if they'd never existed. The part that keeps me up at night? On my desk at home, the chalk appeared one morning. A single word, written in shaky white lines. Present. I can't step inside any school now without feeling watched. Sometimes, when the bell rings, I swear I hear her voice calling my name again. What do you think? Did the fire trap them there, or did the school itself hold on to us? If you had heard that bell, would you have stayed to see who answered, or run the moment you stepped inside? Story 4. If you ever hear someone call your name in an empty school hallway, don't answer. I did once, and it wasn't a classmate. It wasn't even alive. I thought ghosts only haunted graveyards or old houses. I was wrong. Sometimes they linger where they suffered the most. And my school had a secret none of us were supposed to know. I was in high school when it happened. It was exam season, and the principal let students stay late in the library to study. Most people left before dark, but I stayed behind with a few friends. We spread our books out, shared snacks, and tried to cram formulas into our heads. By 9 p.m., everyone had gone except me. I wanted to finish one more chapter, and besides, my ride home wasn't coming until later. The halls were quiet, the kind of silence that usually felt comforting after a long, noisy day. The janitor had locked up most of the classrooms, and the only light came from the buzzing fluorescent tubes above. That was when I first heard it. My name. Soft, drawn out, almost like a whisper. I thought it was one of my friends playing a prank, so I called back, "Very funny." No answer. I went back to my notes, but there it was again. My name, closer this time, stretched through the stillness. Annoyed, I got up and peeked down the hallway. Empty. Lockers lined the walls, classroom doors shut tight. The exit sign glowed red at the end of the corridor, but no movement, no footsteps. I told myself maybe it was the janitor calling, though it didn't sound like his voice. Still, I packed my things quickly, uneasy now. As I slung my bag over my shoulder, I glanced at the window beside me. The glass reflected the library tables, the shelves, and me. But in the reflection, I wasn't alone. Behind me stood a boy I didn't recognize. His uniform was old-fashioned, like something from decades before. His face was pale, features blurred, as if the reflection couldn't hold him fully. I spun around, but the library was empty. The whisper came again. My name. This time, it came from the reflection itself. The boy's lips moved, forming my name over and over. I bolted from the library, sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. The hallway lights flickered as I ran. I knew the way out, but every corner I turned seemed longer, stretching further than it should. My footsteps echoed, and sometimes, just sometimes, they didn't sound like mine. I ducked into a stairwell, hoping to catch my breath. That's when I noticed the wall. Dozens of names scratched into the paint, carved deep with something sharp. Some names I recognized, old classmates, people who had graduated years ago. At the very bottom, freshly etched, was mine. The air grew colder. A door above slammed open, and I heard footsteps running down toward me. I didn't wait to see who or what it was. I sprinted to the first floor, pushing into the main hallway, and there he was, the boy from the reflection, standing in the middle of the corridor. His head was tilted, his arms hanging stiff at his sides. As I slowed, his face shifted, skin peeling away, eyes sinking into dark hollows, mouth stretching wide in an impossible grin. "Say it," he hissed. His voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It rattled the lockers, shook the lights overhead. Say my name. I didn't even know his name. I ran. Somehow, I made it to the main doors, shoving them open with all my strength. Cold night air rushed in, and I stumbled outside, collapsing on the pavement. When I looked back, the doors had shut themselves. Through the glass, I saw him watching me. His pale hand pressed against the window, fingers leaving a faint smear as if the barrier between us was thinner than it should be. The next morning, I told a teacher what happened. She went pale and warned me never to talk about it again. Later, I found out the truth. Years ago, a student had died in that very stairwell. He'd been bullied, cornered, and never made it home. His body was discovered, but his name was erased from the records. Maybe that's why he whispered mine. Maybe he was trying to replace what was taken from him. Even now, when I pass that school, I feel him watching. Sometimes I hear my name when no one is around, carried through the air like it never stopped. What do you think? Was he calling for help? Or was he trying to claim me as the next name on the wall? If you had been in that library, would you have answered or kept running? Story 5. I was warned not to go near the old dormitory at the far end of the school compound. Everyone called it cursed, a place where students once slept but never woke up. I laughed it off, thinking it was just another ghost story meant to scare us. But curiosity, it drags you to places your heart knows it shouldn't go. The night I decided to explore it, the sky was heavy with clouds, and the moon barely peeked through. My footsteps echoed softly against the cracked concrete, and the closer I got, the colder the air seemed to become. It wasn't the natural chill of night. It was sharper, like a draft that came from nowhere and cut straight into my skin. The dormitory was a skeleton of what it used to be. Rusted iron beds leaned against the walls, mattresses ripped open with their stuffing spilling like entrails. A layer of dust coated everything, yet I could see faint footprints across the floor, fresh ones. I froze, staring at them. They didn't lead out. They led deeper inside. I told myself they were probably left by some other daredevil student. But as I followed them, I noticed the dust settling, as if the prints had been made only seconds before I arrived. My throat tightened. Still, I pushed on. The corridor stretched longer than it should have, each door identical, each one slightly open. As I walked past, I heard whispers. They weren't loud, more like a low hum, but they followed me. I turned sharply, but the rooms were empty, just broken beds and shattered windows. Yet the whispers continued, weaving into words I couldn't quite understand. At the very end of the hallway was room 6. Everyone used to say that was where it happened, the mass incident no one liked to speak of. I don't know what possessed me, but I pushed the door open. The room was darker than the others, and colder too. Beds lined up neatly as though students still lived there. My eyes adjusted slowly, and that's when I saw them, outlines of figures lying on the beds. I blinked hard. They were gone. I blinked again, and they were back. Still, silent, motionless. I should have run. I should have turned around. But I stepped further inside. Then one of the figures sat up. Its head turned toward me with a slow, unnatural twist, and though the face was shadowed, I felt the weight of its stare pressing down on me. My breath caught. Another sat up. Then another. Bed by bed, they all began to rise, their heads tilting in unison, their voices joining into a low chant. The sound wasn't human. It was hollow, as though spoken through broken throats. My chest tightened, and I stumbled back toward the door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. My heart hammered, not in my chest but in my ears, drowning everything. The chant grew louder, shaking the walls, shaking my body. Then silence. Every figure turned to face me directly, and in the quiet, one whispered clear as day, "Stay with us." The door flung open behind me, and I bolted, running through the corridor without looking back. I didn't care if the whispers followed, if the shadows reached out. I just needed to escape. When I burst into the open air, the night felt warmer, almost suffocating. I didn't stop until I reached my own dorm, locking the door, curling up on my bed, and praying for morning. But the strangest part? The next day, when I passed the abandoned dormitory in daylight, Room SAXS door was wide open, and on the dusty floor near the entrance, clear and fresh, was a new set of footprints, mine, leading in and not leading out. Would you step into a place like that just to prove your friends wrong? Or would you stay far away, even if you never knew what really happened there? Story 6. If I had turned back when my fuel gauge first dipped below empty, maybe I wouldn't be telling you this story tonight. But I didn't. I kept driving down that lonely stretch of highway everyone in town swore was haunted. It was past midnight, and the road was emptier than my own thoughts. The streetlights had ended miles back, and the only glow came from my weak headlights cutting into the darkness. The highway stretched endlessly, flanked by thick bushland that swayed whenever the night breeze sighed. I kept the windows rolled down halfway to keep myself awake, and the soft hum of the tires on the asphalt was the only rhythm holding me steady. For a while it felt peaceful, almost too peaceful. Then I saw the first figure, a man, standing by the roadside, one hand raised as though waving for help. I slowed instinctively, squinting, but the moment my headlights touched him, he vanished. Not stepped aside, not ran, just gone. I slammed the brakes, heart rattling in my chest, staring at the empty stretch where he had been. I told myself it was exhaustion, shadows playing tricks, but when I glanced in the rearview mirror, he was there, sitting in the back seat, staring at me. I didn't breathe. I didn't even dare blink. Then, in the next second, he was gone again. The back seat was empty, as though he had never been there. I pressed harder on the accelerator. My car roared against the silence, but the highway didn't end. Instead, it stretched longer, each signpost repeating itself, kilometer 17. Again and again, no matter how far I drove. And then the radio, which had been silent all night, flickered to life. Static first, then a faint voice whispering, "Turn back! Turn back!" But I couldn't. I couldn't even find where to turn. The road was straight, endless, devouring me whole. Suddenly, the engine stuttered, coughed, and the headlights flickered. My fuel gauge was still above half, but the car slowed as though invisible hands were dragging it backward. And that's when I saw them. Rows of figures lining the roadside. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Men, women, children, all pale, all watching me. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their mouths opened in silence, wide enough to swallow the night. As the car rolled slower, they stepped onto the road. First one, then another, until they formed a wall ahead of me. I gripped the steering wheel, frozen, sweat dripping down my temples. The figures pressed closer, their faces now visible through the windshield, blank, eyeless, yet somehow staring. And then they spoke in unison, their voices vibrating the glass. "You don't belong here." I slammed my eyes shut and pressed the accelerator even though the car had nearly died. Somehow, it lurched forward, the engine screaming as though it were being forced to obey. When I opened my eyes again, the road was clear. The figures were gone. The highway behind me stretched back into darkness, but ahead, faint in the distance, were city lights. I didn't look in the mirror. I didn't want to see if someone had followed me. By the time I reached the gas station at the edge of town, my fuel tank was still half full, just as it had been when it all started. The attendant leaned into the window, frowning. "Where are you coming from at this hour?" he asked. I told him the name of the highway. His face drained of color, and he stepped back. "That road's been closed for years. No one drives there anymore." But I did. And sometimes, when I drive alone at night, I swear I still hear the faint whisper from my radio. "Turn back." Would you keep driving if you saw figures lining the road? Or would you stop, knowing you might never leave again? Story 7. If a house offers you everything you've ever wanted at half the price, don't take it. That's the rule I broke when I moved into the white two-story on Parker Street. Everyone in the neighborhood called it haunted, but I thought that was just an excuse for why it sat empty for so long. I wish I had listened, because what I saw inside that house still won't leave me alone. The first week felt like a dream. The house had wide windows that let the morning sun spill across polished floors, a kitchen big enough to dance in, and a porch swing that creaked when I sat in it with coffee. It smelled faintly of fresh paint, as though someone had fixed it up just for me. Nights were just as peaceful. The street outside was quiet, only the occasional bark of a stray dog or hum of a passing car breaking the stillness. I slept with the window open, listening to the rhythm of crickets, and felt proud of myself for ignoring the silly warnings. But houses carry memories, and sometimes those memories don't want to stay hidden. The first sign came on the 7th night. I was lying in bed, drifting into that half-sleep where dreams blur with reality, when I heard the sound of footsteps. Not outside, inside. Slow, deliberate, pacing across the wooden floor in the hallway. I sat up, listening. The steps stopped. I told myself it was the house settling, the wood expanding against the cool air. But then, faintly, I heard a knock, 3 soft raps against my bedroom door. I held my breath, waiting. Nothing followed. The next morning, I laughed it off, convincing myself I had dreamt it. Yet when I opened my bedroom door, there were small smudges along the frame. Fingerprints, as if someone had been standing there waiting for me to open. Over the next few nights, things escalated. I would wake to find lights on in rooms I hadn't entered. My shoes, which I always left neatly by the door, would be lined up on the stairs. The porch swing, which had been still when I locked up, would sway gently as though someone had just risen from it. One night, I woke to the sound of water running. I stumbled to the bathroom and found the faucet gushing, steam curling from the sink. When I reached to turn it off, the mirror above it was fogged, and in the condensation, a handprint pressed slowly against the glass from the inside. I backed away, trembling, but when I blinked, the handprint vanished. Still, I tried to rationalize everything. Maybe I left the tap on. Maybe the swing had caught the wind. Maybe I was just too tired. But denial doesn't erase reality. The breaking point came when I invited my cousin over to stay the weekend. She slept in the guest room downstairs. Around 3 a.m., she burst into my room, pale and shaking. "There was someone standing at the foot of my bed," she whispered. "I thought it was you, but when I called your name, they leaned closer. Their face was wrong, like it was sliding off." I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't, because I had been awake upstairs the whole time, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of someone breathing in my own room. The final night I spent in that house was scary. I woke to the bedroom door creaking open. Slowly, too slowly, the air grew colder as the gap widened, until I could see the hallway beyond. Standing there was a figure. It wasn't just a shadow. It had shape, height, and movement. It stepped forward, revealing a face half hidden in darkness. Its eyes glowed faintly, not like lamps, but like wet stones catching light. Its mouth opened, stretching wider and wider, but no sound came out. I tried to scream, but the sound stuck in my throat. The figure crawled onto the foot of my bed, moving unnaturally, joints bending the wrong way. It leaned closer, so close I could smell rot on its breath. And then, it whispered my name. Not shouted. Whispered. Slowly. Perfectly. I don't remember leaving the house. One moment, the figure was above me. The next, I was outside on the porch, gasping for air under the dawn sky. My car keys were in my hand, though I never remembered picking them up. I drove away, never looking back. But sometimes, when I pass a house with its porch light on, I see movement in the upstairs window. A shape, watching, waiting. The house on Parker Street is empty again now, with a for sale sign swinging in the wind. But I know the truth. It's not waiting for another buyer. It's waiting for me to come back. Would you have stayed after the first night of footsteps? Or would you have packed up and left everything behind? Comment below. Do you believe houses can hold onto the memories of the dead? Or do you think I imagined it all? Story 8. If you ever find an apartment listed at a price too good to be true, there's a reason. I learned that the hard way when I signed the lease for apartment 3B. Everyone in the building acted like it didn't exist. No one parked near my door, no one knocked, and neighbors avoided my floor. I thought they were just unfriendly, but on my very first night, I realized they were protecting themselves. The apartment itself looked ordinary. A small living room with beige carpet, a narrow kitchen with humming pipes, and a bedroom with a window overlooking the street. It had that faint smell of old paint and damp wood, but nothing unusual. I furnished it slowly, adding second-hand furniture, a lamp, and a rug to make it cozy. The building was quiet, and that was exactly what I needed. The hum of distant traffic at night lulled me to sleep. For the first week, nothing strange happened. I convinced myself the warnings were just urban myths, the kind people whispered about every old building. I even joked about it when my friend helped me move in. If this place is haunted, at least the ghost can help with rent. I laughed. But jokes lose their meaning when the walls start answering back. The first night it happened, I was lying in bed, phone in hand, when I heard a knock. 3 sharp raps on the wall beside me. I thought it was a neighbor. Thin walls, late-night annoyance, nothing more. I knocked back once, lightly as if to say, "Got it." A moment later, the same knock came again. 3 times. Louder. I pressed my ear to the wall, half expecting to hear muffled voices or a television. But there was nothing. Just silence. The next morning, I asked the landlord about the apartment on the other side. He frowned and said, "That wall doesn't connect to another unit. It's the elevator shaft." I laughed it off nervously, but that night the knocking returned. Only this time it didn't wait for me to respond. Kept going. Steady. Rhythmic. Almost like someone trying to get out. Over the next few nights, the disturbances grew bolder. Lights would flicker even though I had changed the bulbs. My television turned on by itself, always showing static no matter the channel. Objects shifted positions when I left the room. A glass I left on the counter would end up in the sink, dripping with water. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps pacing in the living room. Slow, heavy, dragging steps. I froze in bed, listening as they grew closer to my door. The handle turned, rattling slightly, but the door didn't open. I forced myself to check the next morning. Nothing was out of place, except for a single wet footprint on the carpet just inside the door. It wasn't mine. By the second week, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I invited a friend to stay over, thinking maybe I was losing my mind. Around 2 a.m., the knocking began again, this time on the ceiling. My friend shot up in bed, wide-eyed. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Before I could answer, the overhead light snapped on by itself, flooding the room. And in the corner, just for a second, I saw a figure. Dark, motionless, watching. My friend left the next morning and refused to come back. I woke to the sound of voices. Not one, but many, whispering from the walls, the ceiling, the floor. They weren't in English, low, guttural sounds that rose and fell like chanting. I stumbled into the living room, and that's when I saw it. The television had turned on again, but instead of static, the screen showed my bedroom. Live. I could see my bed, the crumpled sheets, even the dent where I had been lying seconds ago. And then, on the screen, the figure appeared. It stood at the foot of my bed, tilting its head slowly. Its face was blurred, shifting like static, but its body leaned forward, closer and closer to the camera. I spun around, terrified. My bedroom was empty, but when I looked back at the TV, the figure had turned to face me directly. I don't remember grabbing my keys, but I remember running. By dawn, I was in my car, watching the building shrink in the rearview mirror. I called the landlord later, telling him I was breaking the lease. He didn't argue. He only sighed and said, "You lasted longer than most." Apartment 3B is still listed online. The photos showing a bright, empty space with sunlight pouring in. But no one stays longer than a month. And sometimes, when I pass the building, I see a figure in the window of 3B, staring down at the street as though waiting. I never go near that floor again. Would you have stayed after the first night of knocking? Or would you have left everything behind, no matter the cost? Tell me, do you believe apartments can trap the dead? Or do you think fear just makes people see what they want to see? Story 9. If a hotel offers you an empty floor all to yourself, don't accept it. That's the mistake I made when I checked into the Silver Pines Hotel. The receptionist smiled too widely when she handed me the key to room 609, assuring me I'd have the whole floor to myself. I thought I'd lucked out with peace and quiet. But that night, I realized the floor wasn't empty. Not at all. I was in town for a work trip, exhausted from travel. The Silver Pines Hotel was old but charming, with polished marble floors and chandeliers that swayed gently above the lobby. My room was at the very end of the 6th floor. When I stepped out of the elevator, I noticed how silent the hallway was. No luggage carts, no chatter, no doors opening or closing. Room 609 itself was spacious. A large bed, tall curtains, a desk, and an antique wardrobe that creaked when I opened it. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and enjoyed the stillness. Felt like the whole world had gone quiet just for me. I ordered room service, took a hot shower, and finally lay down, thinking I'd sleep better than I had in weeks. But silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it means something's listening. Around midnight, I heard it. Footsteps in the hallway. I thought maybe another guest had checked in, but when I peered through the peephole, the hallway was empty. The steps continued though, slow, deliberate, moving closer, until they stopped directly outside my door. I waited, breath shallow, but no knock came. Instead, the handle rattled, like someone testing it. I backed away, staring at the door, whispering to myself that it was just housekeeping, though I knew how absurd that sounded at midnight. The sound stopped, and I finally convinced myself to lie back down. Minutes later, I heard something worse. From inside the wardrobe came 3 knocks, slow, hollow, as if someone was tapping from within. I froze, staring at the wardrobe. Its door was slightly ajar, casting a thin shadow across the carpet. I forced myself up, grabbed the desk lamp for courage, and yanked the wardrobe open. Empty. Just my jacket hanging, swaying slightly as though it had been brushed by unseen hands. I laughed nervously, telling myself it was nerves, exhaustion, maybe even pipes creaking. But when I closed the wardrobe, I noticed something new. The bed sheets had been pulled down neatly, like someone had prepared the bed for sleep, except I hadn't touched them. That night, I hardly slept. Every time I drifted off, I'd wake to faint noises. The click of the bathroom light, the rustle of curtains, the squeak of the wardrobe door. At one point, I swore I felt the mattress dip, as though someone had sat at the edge of the bed. The next morning, I asked the receptionist if anyone else was staying on my floor. She gave me a tight smile and said, "No, sir, that floor's closed for renovations. You're the only guest." By the second night, I wanted to check out, but stubbornness or maybe curiosity made me stay. That was the worst mistake of my life. At exactly 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of breathing. Not mine. Deep, rasping, uneven breaths. They were coming from the dark corner of the room. I reached for the lamp, but it wouldn't turn on. The switch clicked uselessly, leaving me in thick darkness. Then, slowly, the breathing moved closer, until I could hear it right above me. I pulled the blankets over my face, trembling, but the air under the covers grew colder, heavy, as though something had slipped beneath them with me. A hand, ice cold, brushed my ankle. I tore the blanket away, desperate, and in the faint glow of the streetlight through the curtains, I saw it. A figure crouched on the bedpost, its face twisted, eyes dark hollows, mouth stretched in a grin too wide for its head. It whispered my name in a voice that wasn't mine. I bolted from the room, barefoot, sprinting down the silent hallway. The elevator took forever to arrive, and when it finally did, I didn't care where it took me. Anywhere but that floor. The next morning, I checked out without a word. The receptionist only nodded, sliding the key back without asking why. A week later, I searched online reviews of the Silver Pines Hotel. Buried deep in the comments, I found one that chilled me. Don't stay on the 6th floor. Room 609 is never empty, no matter what they tell you. Even now, when I pass hotels at night, I glance up at the top floors. And sometimes, I see a curtain shift, as though someone inside is waiting for me to check back in. Would you have stayed the second night in that hotel? Or checked out the moment the wardrobe knocked? Comment below. Do you think ghosts linger in hotels because of the countless lives that pass through? Or is it just our imagination playing tricks in unfamiliar places? Story 10. They warned me not to wander into the woods at night. Every village has its own set of warnings, stories whispered by old folks around fires, but I never believed them. The woods behind our home were just trees and silence, nothing more. At least that's what I thought. One night, curiosity pulled me there. I told myself it was only a short walk, just enough to prove the legends wrong. With a torchlight in hand and the moon hiding behind thick clouds, I stepped beneath the heavy canopy. First, it felt ordinary. The air smelled of damp earth and fallen leaves. The ground crunched under my shoes, and the only sound was the rhythm of my breath. Yet there was a stillness, so heavy it pressed against my chest. No insects, no rustling, no owls, just silence. I should have turned back then, but pride wouldn't let me. The deeper I went, the more the path seemed to disappear, swallowed by shadows. The trees grew closer, their branches leaning in as if they were whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. That's when I noticed it, the first disturbance. A faint glow ahead, soft and pale, like a lantern swinging gently. I froze. Who else would be here this late at night? I called out, but my voice felt swallowed by the trees, muffled before it could travel. The glow didn't answer. Instead, it drifted slowly to the side, weaving between the trunks, as if it wanted me to follow. My feet moved before my mind decided, curiosity pulling me like a thread I couldn't cut. The deeper I followed, the stranger it became. My torchlight flickered, dimming with every step, while the pale glow ahead never wavered. Then the whispers started, low, breathy voices, overlapping in tones too faint to understand. They came from all around me, from the branches above, the ground beneath, the air itself. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I couldn't stop walking. It felt as though the woods themselves had taken hold of me, guiding me towards something unseen. The glow finally stopped in a small clearing. My light sputtered and went out completely, plunging me into darkness. But the clearing wasn't empty. All around the circle of trees were shadows, dozens of them, standing tall, motionless, faceless. They didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. My skin prickled, and my throat dried as I realized the pale glow I had followed wasn't a lantern. It was a figure, a woman, draped in white, her hair hanging over her face, her hands outstretched. I stumbled back, but the shadows closed in, forming a ring. The whispers grew louder, swirling into words. Stay. Join us. Forever. My legs trembled, but when I tried to run, the woods shifted. Trees rearranged themselves, blocking my way, twisting into walls that trapped me inside. The woman in white lifted her head, and though her face was pale and hollow, her eyes burned with emptiness that pulled at my soul. The climax came like a storm. The shadows moved closer, their arms stretching unnaturally long, their whispers rising to a deafening chant. My chest tightened, air refusing to fill my lungs. The figure in white floated forward, her hands reaching for me. When she touched my skin, it burned cold, like ice searing into fire. My vision blurred, and I felt myself sinking. Not into the ground, but into her gaze, into the hollow void where her eyes should have been. Somehow I broke free. I don't know if it was adrenaline or sheer terror, but I tore through the woods, branches slashing my skin, roots clawing at my feet. I ran until my lungs screamed, until the trees finally gave way to the edge of the village. I collapsed, trembling, gasping for breath, torchlight still dead in my hand. When morning came, I thought it had been a nightmare. But then I saw it. Mud on my shoes, scratches on my arms, and a single strand of long, pale hair clinging to my sleeve. And the worst part? Every night since then, when the village falls quiet, I hear the whispers outside my window, calling me back. Would you dare enter those woods again, knowing something is waiting, something that doesn't let go?